ESG policymaking for managers and entrepreneurs. Welcome to our masterclass on ESG policymaking for managers and entrepreneurs. Outlined in this training course are the following. 1. An introduction into ESG strategy. 2. Key variables that should make up your ESG strategy. 3. Environmental variables. 4. Social variables. 5. Governance variables. 6. How to design ESG policies. 7. Renewable energies. 8. The carbon problem. 9. Holding the manufacturing companies accountable. 10. Holding the renewables installation equipment, producing companies to strict regulations. 11. Introducing the carbon repayment cycle. 12. The nature conservation option. Introduction. Having a good ESG framework has become integral to every modern business organization. It is a matter of operational ethics, something every forward-thinking management should never ignore. It is good strategy. Apart from the fact that your organization's ESG framework provides an avenue for you to measure your business opportunities and risks, they are also indicators that gauge your organization's performance from a non-financial perspective. Some key criteria that define the longevity of every organization are its corporate governance, ethical values, and sustainability drives. And a variable that closely knits all these three together is the ESG framework. Defined as environmental, social, and governance, ESG is a policy structure that facilitates the implementation of company processes in a way that effectively manages all stakeholders, including in-house employees, whilst also guaranteeing the organization's sustainability drive through carbon neutrality. It is imperative that your organization got it right with its ESG policies, as this will not only improve the confidence of investors and the general public, but will also save your organization from likely infractions and possible litigations. Let's now consider the key variables that make up your ESG framework. First is environmental. Every organization needs to be seen as a value-adding proposition to its environment, and not a disaster magnet. The impact of the operations of your organization on its surroundings can make or mar its public image. Climate change is a growing concern worldwide, and it does help if your organization is seen to support the global cause and not be in the opposition ranks. Key environmental factors that should be addressed in your environmental policy framework include 1. Air pollution. Are your business operations poisoning the atmosphere? If they are, it is imperative that you found better ways that would reduce your carbon flaring. This is particularly necessary if you're in the oil and gas business. 2. Water pollution. What impact does your organization have on the seas and oceans? Are your business operations directly or indirectly a threat to aquatic life? 3. Energy. A vivid question here is the quantity of energy your organization leverages on for operational performance. Is energy being efficiently used? Could you adopt more robust energy conservation measures without adversely affecting your deliverables? 4. Carbon footprint. This addresses the amount of greenhouse gases your organization constantly flares into the atmosphere. What efforts have your organization made towards carbon neutrality? Have your emissions reduced? Or are you yet to make any deliberate attempts at this global vision? 5. Deforestation. Besides the danger deforestation poses for wildlife, the battle against climate change cannot be won solely with a reduction in carbon emissions alone. We also need the constant oxygen supplied by forests and vegetations. This then brings up some salient questions. Do your company's operations adversely affect the forests? And if they do, what effort is your organization making to ensure that for every tree fell, a couple more are planted in its stead? Now let's consider the second variable, social. An organization's relationship with its stakeholders must be a priority. Without people, an organization cannot exist, neither can it function. From your organization's staff, right down to your suppliers, customers, and community, there must be a deliberate attempt to provide a conducive environment for all stakeholders to thrive. Some of the variables that are brought into view here include 1. The welfare of your staff and employees. Are you paying your staff enough money for the value they bring to your organization? How safe is your work environment, and how effective are your HSSE policies? 2. Your organization's relationship with its suppliers. How is the interaction between your organization and its suppliers? Are they being treated fairly? Is your purchasing strategy reaping them off, or is the relationship mutually beneficial? 3. Your organization's CSR initiatives. Giving back to the community where your organization operates not only builds an emotional bank account for your brand in the hearts of your market and audience, it also gives your company a credible image which will worth every penny in the long run. The third variable in the mix is governance. The type of policies that guide your organization's operations say a lot about your organization's structure and value system. In this regard, the following variables are brought into the light. 1. Business ethics. What standards have you set for your organization? What lines are your organization willing to cross in order to get the job done? What is your organization's position on bribery and lobbying? Are you willing to condone sharp business practices for the good of the cause? Or will your organization stand firm on its ethical values? 2. Abuse of privileges. Perhaps this is the most sensitive part of the governance framework. What compensation benefits have you allocated to your organization's executives? Is the remuneration fair vis-a-vis the general staff reward system? Or are your senior staff being unduly rewarded at the expense and dissatisfaction of the other employees? 3. Gender equality. What opportunities do women and employees from minority groups have in your organization? Are they structurally marginalized? Or do you have structures in place that consciously make provision for their involvement and growth within your organization's ranks? 4. Employee protection. A vital part of ensuring a conducive work environment for all staff is the provision of protection. Are your employees insulated from office bullying? Do you have protocols in place that ensure that staff can easily report infractions and harassments with anonymity? All these variables are integral to designing a good ESG strategy. Now let's review ESG policymaking. How to design ESG policies. Efforts to design viable ESG policies must be strategic. And whilst these policies are generally created by an organization's management, it is helpful if all stakeholders are involved in the policy design, as they would all be required to participate during its implementation. Let's now itemize a step-by-step procedure through which you can create meaningful and effective ESG policies. 1. Identify the problems. We previously itemized key metrics in the environmental, social, and governance performance assessment of an organization. Now, bring your organization under the scrutiny of these variables and assess its performance vis-a-vis the expected deliverables. This will help you identify the problem areas which your organization needs to urgently address. 2. Set targets. When setting targets for your organization, it is important to be realistic. Give yourself attainable targets. There is no point declaring policies which will generate apathy and get generally ignored. Take incremental wins. Have a base to build on from, and then targets can be updated gradually until final aims are reached. 3. Create policies to achieve those set targets. Once you have your targets outlined, now create policies to achieve them. Do make sure that the policies are not ambiguous. All your employees must be on board, from your executive management right down to all junior staff. 4. Measure progress. It is not enough to set policies. Compliance and progress must be constantly measured. Set a benchmark, and once that benchmark is attained, you can then raise the bar. The goal is to keep your organization's ESG strategy constantly improving. Given the direct influence good ESG practices have on an organization's fortunes, every progress made in these strategies will have an indirect effect on your organization's image and profitability. Renewable energies. Renewable energies have given the world a ray of hope over the dark clouds of climate change. Energy efficiency measures have also increased the possibilities of cutting down on greenhouse gases in our atmosphere. But whilst we focused on legislations and moral persuasions on individuals and businesses to compel them to cut down on their carbon footprints, we have somewhat forgotten that the production of these renewable energy assets contributes a significant quota to carbon flaring. This is called embedded carbon. In the euphoria of discovering ways to create energy from non-fossil fuel sources, we have taken our eyes off the ball. We started singing victory songs when we still have enemy spies in our camp. Embedded carbon, as known as embodied carbon, is the last piece of the puzzle, which is yet to be cracked. It is important to note at this point that whilst the possibilities provided by renewable energies are laudable, our ultimate goal from onset was carbon neutrality, not low carbon. If it was just low carbon, gas as an energy source had provided a viable alternative for the world, barring the carbon flaring that also takes place during gas explorations. But the global agenda is zero carbon, and all oars mustn't rest till we paddle our way to that desired destination. This book seeks to unravel the carbon enigma. It also proposes a tailored route that will see the world to true carbon neutrality by proposing the carbon repayment cycle. This process, if meticulously followed, will see the world to zero carbon status within a space of 20 to 30 years. The carbon problem. Climate change has become a worrying subject for the world today. And central to this scourge is carbon. Global temperatures are climbing, resulting in heat waves, encroaching deserts, rising sea levels, and many other natural unwanted occurrences. Carbon is a GHG, which is generated when fossil fuels are burned. The main types of fossil fuels include oil, coal, and gas. Perhaps it is important to note that the major effect of excessive carbon in our atmosphere is that it traps the heat released by the Earth in the atmosphere. This, coupled with the heat directed at the Earth from the sun's rays, make temperatures on our planet steadily rise. The result is global warming. To drastically cut down the effects of global warming, emissions into the atmosphere must be reduced. And this can be achieved by a global shift from fossil fuels to renewable sources for power generation. The importance of renewable energy in the global quest to combat climate change cannot be overemphasized. The major attraction of renewable energy sources is that they do not get depleted. Unlike fossil fuels, renewable sources get replenished easily. Some of the major sources of renewable energy include solar energy. Perhaps the most abundant form of renewable energy all over the globe is solar energy. This energy, which is derived from the sun's rays, is quite resourceful. It delivers electricity, cooling, heat, and lighting. The solar energy technology is the process through which photovoltaic PV panels convert sunlight into electrical energy. Wind energy. This uses the power of the wind. As a process, the wind turns blade-like propellers around a rotor. As it turns, it spins a generator, which ultimately creates electricity. It is important to place wind turbines in locations that have strong winds, so that maximum outputs can be generated. Furthermore, wind energy can be deployed onshore or offshore. Hydropower. Here, energy is accessed from the movement of water from high to low points. Particularly, hydroelectric power is often generated using a dam to influence the flow of water. And as the water rushes down, turbines and generators are used to convert kinetic energy to electricity. Biomass. This is also called bioenergy. It is the process of generating power from organisms. As a process, it utilizes plant-based materials amongst others as a sort of fuel to produce electricity. The most common materials used for bioenergy include agricultural wastes, energy crops, and even wood residues. It is, however, important to highlight at this point that though biomass is considered as renewable energy, it can also be non-renewable, depending on the materials used during energy generation. The opponents of biomass strongly appraise it as a non-renewable energy source, due to the GHG emissions that take place during the energy conversion process. There is also the subtle matter of deforestation, which is often a byproduct of biomass. Geothermal. This is deriving energy from the heat within the earth. Wells are drilled into reservoirs to tap hot steam. The steam then rotates a turbine, which in turn activates a generator, and then electricity is produced. Aside from the steam which is derived from the bowels of the earth, hot water can also be gotten during the process, to supply heating during cold seasons. These renewable sources of energy have significantly reduced carbon emissions on our planet. But as the world embarks on various campaigns to see renewable energy sources replace fossil fuels, there is the underlying argument that the process of producing this renewable energy sources emits a significant amount of carbon into the atmosphere. This then makes the whole process of shift energy sources insincere or flawed. Worse is the argument that most countries in the West only care about their environments and are inconsiderate to the plight of the environments where these energy equipments are produced. Most of the renewable energy equipment used in the world today are produced in Asia, hence, the carbon flaring happens more in the Eastern Hemisphere. To ensure transparency and the longevity of climate change objectives, there must be a total approach to the agenda. Carbon flared in Asia will ultimately affect the world as a whole, given that all elements in nature are connected and are not mutually exclusive from each other. To ensure that energies gotten from renewable sources are truly carbon neutral, the process of producing the renewable energy equipment must be devoid of any GHG emission. As previously discussed, carbon is mainly generated from fossil fuels, which are non-renewable energy sources. Using the three major fossil fuels, coal, gas and oil, do find below the carbon emitted per kilowatt-hour. For electricity generated from coal, which is a non-renewable source, carbon emissions are estimated at 525 grams per kilowatt-hour. For electricity generated from gas, carbon emissions are estimated at 184 grams per kilowatt-hour. For electricity generated from oil, carbon emissions are estimated at 247 grams per kilowatt-hour. Given the above estimated figures, let's calculate the carbon footprint in the below exercises. Scenario 1. A factory in Nairobi, Kenya, is powered by coal. Electricity generated for manufacturing monthly is 720,000 kilowatt-hours. What is the carbon footprint of this factory? Results. Carbon emissions from coal is estimated at 525 grams per kilowatt-hour. Therefore, total emissions for the month equals 0.525 kilograms 720,000 equals 378,000 kilogram. Scenario 2. It is winter in Ontario, Canada. Due to a drop in temperatures, an average home uses about 45 kilowatt-hours in coal-powered electricity. Each home also supplements the electricity from coal with that from heating oil. Electricity generated from heating oil is estimated to be about 20 kilowatt-hours. Calculate the average carbon footprint for each home in Ontario. Results. Using 0.525 kilograms per kilowatt-hour for coal-powered electricity and 0.247 kilograms per kilowatt-hour for heating oil-powered electricity, the total carbon footprint from an average home equals 0.525 kilograms 45 plus 0.247 kilograms 20 equals 23.625 kilograms plus 4.94. equals 28.57 kilograms. Holding the manufacturing companies accountable. Manufacturing companies play a very significant role to our societies and economies. They are solely responsible for most of the products used by consumers, given that they translate raw materials into finished goods. It, however, is becoming increasingly clear that this indispensable role they perform is proving costly to our planet. And whilst we cannot deny their intrinsic value in the grand scheme of things, we must find a way to ensure the continued existence of these industries without endangering our planet. Perhaps, at this point, it is important to allude that the equipment and machineries used by manufacturing and producing companies are quite capital-intensive. The power needed to run these machineries are also significant, which naturally explains why the carbon consequences of their operations is also noticeable. Currently, novel energy systems are still unaffordable to most homes and users. This is due to the high cost of installing these grids. And since the power needed by manufacturing and producing companies are extremely higher, it only suggests that the costs attendant in the process of switching from conventional power sources to renewables will also be humongous for these industries. This explains why most of them have refused to join the Cleaner Earth campaign. It then becomes expedient to find ways of balancing the carbon and GHG content in our atmosphere, pending the time when we can move all industries on Earth to the renewable plane. This movement process is also attainable, and is not rocket science. To facilitate true carbon neutrality on our planet, where all stakeholders have moved on to renewable energy supplies, a carbon repayment cycle is proposed. This ideology is discussed in subsequent chapters in this book. Let's now review ways through which governments and institutions can hold manufacturing and producing companies accountable to the zero carbon agenda. First and foremost on this list is carbon taxes. Ever since the days of human civilizations, societies and governments have been administered with taxes. Basic knowledge in science elucidates that vegetations feed on some type of carbon. And since our goal is to reduce the presence of carbon in our atmosphere, we perhaps need to make our Earth greener, literally. Creating forests and vegetation incurs some sort of expense. Expenses that can adequately be offset by taxes levied on some of the chief culprits of carbon flaring. To ensure equity in billing and appropriate measurements, industries should be mandated to account for the carbon they dispense during their operations. Just the same way annual and biannual audits are carried out for public information and stakeholder awareness, legislation must compel manufacturing and producing companies to include carbon accounting in their published financial statements. These accounted carbon figures can then be verified by institutional inspectors to ensure its veracity. For every kilogram of carbon emitted, it is proposed that industries be made to pay 5 cents in taxes. This implies that if carbon audits reveal that ABCZ Industries flared 50,000 kilograms of carbon in the financial year ending 2021, the industry's accrued carbon taxes for that year would be $50,000. 0.05 equals $2,500, $2,500 US. This billed tax is meant to achieve two distinct results. The income from the tax will be used by the governmental institution to create more forests, green vegetation, that will compensate for and absorb the carbon being flared. The tax is an indirect fine levied on the industry, which is meant to compel the company's corporate governance to speed up the migration of its energy source to renewables. Carbon taxes, while viable a strategy, has economic implications. Without a doubt, the costs incurred from the taxes will be passed on to the final consumers. And if the manufacturing companies don't feel the direct pain of the taxes on their bottom lines, they wouldn't feel compelled to adopt renewable energy supplies, which is the ultimate agenda of the carbon taxes. For societies that have institutions and governmental structures which control product prices, the carbon tax regimes could work. In developing countries, however, where price control is absent, and inflation flies around unchecked, the levy of carbon taxes would only incentivize the manufacturing companies to exploit the consumers of their products. In economies that are vulnerable, where carbon taxes are the least favored option, a Plan B is required. The Plan B, which is second of the list, is what I call the Energy Migration Loan. The Energy Migration Loan is the process where the government uses its financial muscle and capacity to force change in the operations of manufacturing and producing companies. And I must say the process is quite capital intensive, even for the governments. To ensure that this is seamlessly executed, governments might need the support of international organizations and banks, who would efficiently finance the process flows. The Energy Migration Loan see governments finance the installation of renewable energy grids required by these individual industries to power their operations. The new grids are installed, and immediately the government, through its institution, decommissions any conventional power supply that was formerly used by the manufacturing company. The cost of the initial installation of the renewable energy grid is solely borne by the concerned government, and is considered a financial loan to the company. Repayments can then be made to the government, being seen as energy savings by the concerned manufacturing company. These repayments can be structured monthly, quarterly or annually, depending on the agreement preferred by the financing government. The process is quite clear and simple. When the manufacturing company was powered by a conventional, non-renewable source of energy, regular payments were made for energy billing. For those powered by generators, regular expenses were also incurred on petrol or diesel. These previous payments will no longer be existent under this financial scheme. The only payments which the manufacturing companies will now require to pay is the regular repayments they make back to the government institution which finance their renewable energy grid. Countries already have similar structures in place for farmers, traders and entrepreneurs. During the COVID-19 pandemic, several governments in our world created bailout programs for businesses and individuals to help with their sustenance whilst they couldn't work for a living. Let us consider this proposition as an energy bailout scheme. God knows our earth really needs it. It is very clear that not all governments have the financial muscle to pull off this structure easily. But as explained earlier, this is where international organizations and banks earn their pay. The United Nations Environmental Programme, UNEP, United Nations Development Programme, UNDP, United Nations Operations, UNOPs, and many other flagship bodies in the UN are poised for such activities. And then, we have the regional development banks. In Asia, we have the Asian Development Bank, ADB. In Africa, we have an institution in the West African Union of ECOWAS that was set up solely for renewable energy, called ECREEE. Governments in different countries can partner with the international agencies close to them to implement this financial structure. Also, it must be noted that it is not in all cases that governments will need to take 100% of the financial responsibility of the concerned manufacturing companies. Depending on the financial capability of the industrial company, the government can work out a shared arrangement for the financial cost of the renewable grid installation. For more established companies, who have the financial muscle to implement this energy migration, a simple governmental decree or law mandating compliance for the concerned company will suffice. Let's take a financial example. Our dummy company, ABCZ Industries, uses 9,000 kilowatt-hours of electricity on a monthly basis from a conventional energy power source. In addition to this conventional power source, the manufacturing company also supplements their power needs with energy derived from diesel generators. Last year, the energy costs incurred by ABCZ Industries are shown in Figure 1 below. Fig. 1. To move ABCZ Industries to total renewable energy supply, under our proposed scheme, the government decides to finance the installation of a renewable energy grid. Total cost of the required grid is $175,600. $175,600 only. Under this scheme, the financial repayment arrangement between the government and ABCZ Industries can be facilitated with the simple payback method. Simple payback is total cost of installation, Annual savings. Using Fig. 1. Annual savings is the annual cost of energy which was incurred by ABCZ Industries when it relied on a conventional source of energy supply, which equals $19,300. The structure of repayment using simple payback equals $175,619,300, equals 9.098. We could then safely deduce that ABCZ industry payments to the government will last for a total of 9 years. The government would not only have financed ABCZ Industries' move to renewables, but would also have ensured that ABCZ Industries doesn't flare any carbon during the period under review, and also after the period under review. It will then be expected that ABCD Industries continue to generate their energy supply from renewable sources, even after the government's financial scheme is ended. For a more robust consideration of all variables involved in the transition to renewable energy supply, governments could adopt those renewable energy financial determinants in their administration of the proposed scheme. The levelized cost of energy (LCOE) is a favored option in this regard. To learn more about the use of LCOE, please review my book, Energy Efficiency: The Sustainable Solution to the Energy Crisis in Developing Countries. This then takes us to the third, and perhaps most important way to hold manufacturing companies accountable. And this is through legislation. World leaders can rally together in conferences for several decades, but without the right show of commitment, all be a total waste of time. Speeches do little, if they're not followed by enacted laws and legislations. Without laws, mandating manufacturing and producing companies to migrate to renewable energies will be met with lawsuits and legal barriers. So the most important aspect of this carbon neutrality campaign should be the legal framework that justifies and enables the drive towards the zero carbon status. Currently, only few countries in the world have actually shown commitment to this agenda. And whilst these few might seem to have achieved giant strides, when we consider that we all share the same planet and are all affected by the effects of global warming in one way or another, then we realize that efforts, when not jointly made by all, are no efforts at all. World leaders should go beyond just oratory and playing to the galleries. Without laws, there'd be anarchy. Laws are meant to shape conduct, processes, and ways of living. If we truly desire carbon neutrality in our planet, all countries must get in line. The desire for legislations on the migration to renewable energies must also take the same urgency and resolve as does the ones on terrorism and other global threats. After all, climate change is a global threat. Holding the renewables installation equipment, producing companies to strict regulations. We are now at the core of the embodied carbon mystery. Most countries in Europe have claimed successes in their drives towards carbon neutrality. Many in this region generate energy from wind, much more than that which is required for use. This at first sight seems a laudable feat. But at what cost? We have one planet where we all live. Just one. Until the day that astrophysicists and other interstellar experts show us another habitable planet, we're all stuck here. And if there's one thing global warming and climate change have taught us, it is that a problem happening anywhere on our planet is a problem to all. I don't know how many carbon-flaring Scandinavian countries have, but the melting ice caps over there do not care which country emits the carbon. These carbon and GHGs go up and create a carpet on our atmosphere. The same atmosphere we call share. We all eventually suffer the consequences. Given the above, it makes absolutely no sense to have some countries in Asia produce these renewable energy installation gadgets, flaring significant amounts of carbon into the atmosphere in the process, while some other countries in the world then think they've achieved some carbon neutrality successes. Besides the fact that science does not support their argument, given that carbon is still flared into the same atmosphere we all use, any claim of achievement at this stage is early and laughable at best. The renewable gadget produced ensure that power is gotten from renewable sources. But the process of making these gadgets is strangely through non-renewable sources. The carbon emitted during the production of the renewable energy gadgets is called embodied carbon, also known as embedded carbon. To ensure that energy gotten from these renewable energy gadgets is totally zero carbon, we must ensure that the process of producing them is also void of any carbon flaring. To address this embodied carbon enigma, this book proposes a process called the carbon repayment cycle, and it is discussed in the next chapter. Before then, let us consider some ways through which we can hold the companies who produce these renewable energy gadgets to certain standards. It is not enough that they provide a useful source for mankind to generate energy from renewable sources. That source they provide must be clean and is subject to scrutiny. It is important to note that not all renewable energy installation gadgets are produced in Asia, however, a significant number is. And though there are economic gains attendant in the production of these renewable energy gadgets, given the employment and other resources that they give to people in the societies within this region, it is still up to the governments of these concerned countries to ensure that the world doesn't use their environments as carbon dumping grounds. The consequences far outweigh the benefits. If economic reasons, however, compel governments of these producing countries to allow the continued production of renewable energy gadgets in their nations, they must instill certain standards. Standards which will be prerequisites for industrial operations. Firstly, all variables suggested in the previous chapter for manufacturing companies should apply to renewable energy gadget producing companies too. Carbon taxes, the energy migration loan, and a detailed legislation governing the operations of these companies must be in place. Secondly, to compensate countries where these gadgets are produced, governments in these countries should levy additional export taxes on the grid gadgets. The taxes can then be passed on to the destination countries as increased costs. Asia has long been the destination of many plants and industries due to the cheap labor there. Many countries in the West, who due to stringent labor laws are unable to set up factories in their countries. These ones then opt Asia as a preferred location. Governments in Asia should recoup the losses incurred to their environment from air pollution through fines. Fines billed as export taxes. Income from these taxes can then be used to improve forestation and vegetation, which absorbs the flared carbon from their atmospheres. This process is not only beneficial to the countries in Asia, but will in the long run also support the world's quest to combat climate change. We clearly noted in the preceding chapter that a gain to a region in the world is not necessarily a gain to all. But a loss to a region is definitely a loss to all. The third way renewable energy gadgets producing countries can ensure parity to their environments is by enforcing the carbon repayment cycle through legislation. This carbon repayment cycle is not only beneficial to them, but can also be adopted by every industry and country in the world. It is the long-lasting strategy that ensures that the world will be truly carbon neutral in a few decades to come. The carbon repayment cycle. The carbon repayment cycle proposition assumes that government intervention in the transition to renewable energy supply for production is non-existent or at the barest minimum. It is a structured way to ease renewable assets manufacturing companies from conventional energy sources to renewable ones, without adversely affecting their business operations, longevity, and sustainability. And ultimately, it nullifies the embodied carbon elements in asset production. For the purpose of this explanation, let us assume the following variables. Our subject assets manufacturing company, ABCZ Industries, is located in Indonesia, Southeast Asia. ABCZ Industries manufactures solar energy panels. Production turnover is done quarterly, with an average output of 5,000 panels. Each panel after production completion generates 5 kilowatts. To produce the quarterly turnover, ABCZ Industries requires an average of 15,000 kilowatt-hours. The conventional energy source used by ABCZ Industries is coal. This energy source incurs carbon emissions, estimated at 525 grams per kilowatt-hour. Find below the suggestion carbon repayment cycle for ABCZ Industries. Of the total assets produced, 75% should be sold as procedural, whilst 25% must be retained by the company to keep in store for future use. Embodied carbon emissions here are still at 100%. This is the first cycle. Fig 2. Fig 3. Cycle 1. In the second quarter, below are the changes. ABCZ Industries incurs some expenses in the purchase of solar inverters and storage batteries. This investment, plus the retained solar panels, are then able to generate some renewable energy for the manufacturing processes. These invariably reduce total dependence on the conventional energy source, coal. See figures 4 and 5 below. Fig 4. To compensate for losses during renewable energy supply, and to avoid excessive depletion of the grid, ABCZ Industries only takes a portion of the available energy supplied by the installed solar grid during this quarter. This portion accounts for a third of the total required energy for manufacturing processes. The other 2/3 is gotten from the conventional source. Fig 5. Of the total assets produced in this second quarter, 75% should be sold as usual, whilst 25% must be retained by the company to add to the installed solar grid for an improved capacity generation. Embodied carbon emissions here have plummeted to 66.7%. Cycle 2. By the third quarter, significant progress has been made by ABCZ Industries in their pursuit to eradicate embodied carbon. ABCZ Industries again incurs some expenses to upgrade the capacities of the existing inverters and batteries. This investment, plus the total retained solar panels, improve the amount of renewable energy generated for the manufacturing processes. Dependence on the conventional energy source, coal, is not at the barest minimum. See figures 6 and 7 below. Fig 6. Again, to compensate for losses during renewable energy supply, and to avoid excessive depletion of the grid, ABCZ Industries only takes a portion of energy supply from the installed solar grid during this quarter. But the difference now is that they can afford to take 2/3 of their total required energy from the solar grid installation. The other third is gotten from the conventional source. Fig 7. Of the total assets produced in this third quarter, 75% should be sold as usual, whilst 25% must be retained by the company to add to the installed solar grid for an improved capacity generation. Embodied carbon emissions here have plummeted to 33.3%. Cycle 3. By the fourth quarter, ABCZ Industries can confidently power their operations on renewable energy, fulfilling their pursuit to totally eradicate embodied carbon. ABCZ Industries again incurs some expenses to upgrade the capacities of the existing inverters and batteries. This investment, plus the total retained solar panels, provide the total amount of renewable energy required for the manufacturing processes. Energy from coal is no longer required. See figures 8 and 9 below. Fig 8. In this case, despite the expected losses during renewable energy supply and the need to avoid excessive depletion of the grid, ABCZ Industries can still confidently power their manufacturing operations through the installed solar grid this quarter. Energy is 100% from renewable, implying through carbon neutrality. Fig 9. Of the total assets produced in this fourth quarter, 100% can be sold as usual, none is needed for retainer until solar grid assets near their useful life. In this case, ABCZ Industries can start the cycle 3 quarters before the expected expiration of the asset efficiency. Embodied carbon emissions here are 0%. Cycle 4. The nature conservation option. The pursuit of international organizations in the recent past has been to stem the tide of deforestation. Campaigns have been made to encourage wood-related businesses who cut down trees to plant a tree for every tree that is cut down. There has also been the drive to have governments infuse nature parks into living environments and reduce the rate at which forests are converted to urban centers. Perhaps the world need to take the bull by the horn. We should stop playing catch-up and being defensive, and we should take the offensive approach. The fight to combat global warming is a long fight. And I must allude that we cannot afford to fight fair. As much as all recommendations in this book, which seek to suggest ways to compensate our atmosphere for all carbon flared, we really need to drive towards pushing the numbers the other way. All former talk has always been about reducing GHGs in our atmosphere. Now we need to think of infusing as much oxygen as possible into the atmosphere to twist the scales. Let's give our scientists a new problem to deal with. And this scenario is really achievable. Let's review this. The body of the Earth is currently occupied by water to a length of 2/3. The seas do not dispel carbon into our atmosphere, which implies that the GHGs that have constantly given us nightmares are just the result of activities that occur on 1/3 of the Earth's circumference. In this portion where humans live, we need to increase our forest reserves. Aside from the thick jungles and mangroves in South America, very few forests on Earth today contribute quite a significant amount of oxygen into our atmosphere. And here lies our problem. And the pathway to the solution. As a viable solution to the climate change problem on Earth today, the world need to come together and ensure that half of that 1/3 portion of the Earth that is covered by man is proliferated with forests. This is a radical approach. And the results will trump the initial sacrifice. To achieve this, governments of all countries must show resolve. There must be the will to encroach deserts with forestation. Urban centers, roads and highways must be lined with trees. Rivers and seabeds must be converted to mangrove swamps. We must be intentional in our approach to make the Earth green. And we should not stop until astronauts in space shuttles millions of miles away look at the Earth and see only water. And some green surface patches.